Little Nightmares Enhanced Edition. Released October of 2025. Available on all modern platforms. Retailing for $19.99 on Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation. And $29.99 on Switch 2, which is also only available as the Complete Edition with DLC. Little Nightmares Enhanced Edition is based off the original Little Nightmares, which originally released in April of 2017. The enhancements are mostly visual, adding 4K resolution, 60 frames per second, and ray tracing. In actual practice, the game really doesn't look that different. There are claims that the controls have been tightened up for this version, though I personally could not tell a difference. But anyway. Little Nightmares is a horror stealth game. You play as Six, a little girl in a yellow raincoat. You are trying to escape from what we find out is a massive ship. All you have are your yellow raincoat and a lighter. And you go from room to room, sometimes having to solve puzzles, oftentimes having to escape some kind of horrible and gigantic monstrosity. Though each part of the game actually has a different monstrosity that you're running from, and they slowly get harder to run from, as the first one is blindfolded, the second ones can see, and so forth and so on. And calling this game Little Nightmares is very accurate, as everything in it has that weird, surreal quality of a nightmare. Not necessarily scary, but more unsettling. And some of the unsettling ideas only come with reflection, like how in the first area there are many children in cages, and then in the next section there's a lot of wrapped packages of meat, and it's pretty obvious where that meat came from when you stop to think about it. It is a little odd that Six never attempts to help the other children. In the first section of the game, you see children in cages constantly. One even throws you a scrap of food, but Six never seems to reciprocate that kindness or pay it forward. Frequently throughout the game, you'll find yourself stuck in one room or another, having to do a very specific action. And once you figure out what you need to do, it will seem obvious in retrospect. But on many occasions, what you need to do isn't necessarily obvious. Like this room, with a TV in it. When we came in, there was a drop-off, so going back the way we came is not an option. And I assumed we needed to use the TV to make noise. But when I first got to the room, I tried to interact with it, and couldn't get anything to happen. I then spent a long time examining everything else in the room. Trying to pull the chair, trying to climb up the shelves. None of that helped. Then, out of desperation, I investigate the TV again, and apparently I just wasn't standing in quite the right spot to turn the TV on. And there is something so incredibly frustrating when you have the right idea, but I guess you just didn't get to that exact right spot you needed to be in to execute that idea. And this wasn't an isolated incident. Later on, you encounter this meat grinder. Nothing you can do with it by itself. But you can go to the room above it, where you can drag meat onto an obvious trapdoor. But how you open the trapdoor wasn't necessarily obvious. In fact, there's nothing on the screen with the meat in the trapdoor to open it. And not on the screen next to that either. You have to go back down to the meat grinder and pull on this lever to make the trapdoor open, which then makes a little string of sausages for you to swing across and progress. And it's just that I didn't pick up on that switch being there the first time I saw the meat grinder. And that's not necessarily the game's fault. And in fairness, the game is very forgiving when you happen to meet your end, as you'll respawn either in the last room you were in, or at least the last room that was safe, which is generally not that far back from where you were. So is Little Nightmares Enhanced Edition worth your time and money? Well, that does depend. Did you play the original Little Nightmares when it came out? Because if you did, there's nothing really new here for you. The visuals are slightly enhanced, but the puzzles are all the same. So I don't see a whole lot of reason to get this again if you have the original. Now, if you've never played Little Nightmares on the other hand, This is an excellent way to experience the game on modern hardware. But I do think this is the kind of game that you play through once, and then you're pretty much done with. But as it retails for only $20 on most platforms, that's really not much of an issue. So yes, I do recommend Little Nightmares Enhanced Edition, as long as you don't already have access to the original version of Little Nightmares. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.